Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Stand Up Speakeasy. I'm pretty excited for today because I have my very first international comic, and he's all the way. He's here visiting and performing at my homeroom tonight. So, without further ado, Derrek Carriveau, welcome to the show, Derrek. How are you?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. Thank you for joining me today. It means a lot.
Happy to be here.
Awesome. So, what made you move all the way to Poland?
So I've been living in Poland for 17 years now, and a good friend of mine had moved there a year before me, and there was a job opening at the end of his first year as a native speaker of English teaching at the University of Technology. And at the time, I wasn't married. I didn't own a house. I didn't like the job I had very much, so I thought I would rather go to Poland for a year, not like it, than to spend the rest of my life thinking, what if I'd gone to Poland? So I thought I was going to be there for a year, and 17 years later, I'm still there.
Wow, that's quite a long time there for you. And what's
Yeah.
it like out there? Like the whole scenery. I've never been, but
It's a pretty beautiful country, and I live in a really nice city. It was I'd say it was originally Polish, but historically it was German. It was a German city for about 500 years, and then after Poland was put back on the map after World War II, the whole region that I'm in became a part of Poland again. So there's certain places that are really pretty, and certain places that are that were built up by the communists or the Soviets or whatever you want to say that are not very pretty, but. It's a nice city. I live in what's basically a college town. There's about 20 universities and academies in the city, so it's a young city. It's got a lot of good energy to it, and Poland itself it's nice. There's some nice things to see there.
indeed. So you've lived in Poland for 17 years now, and how long have you been a stand-up comic?
I've been doing stand up for about 9 years now, I think.
Awesome. That's fantastic. And you also do voiceover work as well. And where can we hear your voice?
Wow, there's one place you can definitely hear it is this. It's an app. It's a Polish English dictionary called Diki, and if you want to know how a certain English word is pronounced, I'm one of the voices for that. I've done a lot of just more like in-house stuff. So like companies will, for training videos, or there's been the occasional commercial. I have some of my voice work over on my YouTube channel, but a lot of it, God, what is it? I think there's a company called Tryfly, and they make clothing meant for people who do skydiving. And I've done quite a few commercials for them. So if you go to their Facebook page, Tryfly dot whatever, on Facebook, you should be able to hear me in a couple of places.
Fantastic. That's good stuff. My buddy's he does voiceovers for like YouTube videos and stuff too, and it's a pretty cool thing that it's pretty neat to hear your own voice and stuff on commercials that are seen worldwide by people and apps
Yeah.
and stuff too. And you're a fellow podcaster too. What's the name of your podcast and how did it all get started and all that good stuff?
So my podcast, can I swear on this or should I not swear?
You
Because there's
can FCC doesn't regulate this, so you're
Okay,
fine.
just want to make. I didn't know how you approached it. So I have a podcast called "I Fucking Love This Record," and I have a different guest on. Well, typically it was each week, but I've slowed down a bit, and we talk about a record that we both love, and that can be found at lovethisrecord.com, and a few other things you'll see here at the bottom of the screen for that. So I knew I wanted to do a podcast. I was doing one for a job I had at the time, so it was a business podcast. And I wanted to do a personal one, and I really love music, and that was the idea I came up with. I had been listening to another podcast called "Why I Hate This Album," and that's it's a very different approach because they don't like the albums, and so they make fun of it, and it's snarky and funny. But I wanted to take the opposite approach and just have different people on to talk about records that we love.
Indeed. And if you were locked up in a cabin for a week, which five albums would you take with you to listen to?
Oh, I would take the Twilight Singers' Blackberry Bell. I would take Jane's Addiction's Nothing Shocking. I would take the Afghan Wigs' Black Love. What else would I take with me? I think I would take. Now, of course, you asked if I would have thought about it. I wasn't expecting this question. What else would I take with me? Maybe Faith No More's The Real Thing. Do I get one more, or is that five?
I think we'll go a wild card and throw an extra one in there.
throw an extra one in there. What else would I? I would take the Talking Heads' "Fear of Music." I've been listening to that one a lot lately because my son likes it. So that's been on my turntable lately. So I'll go with that one.
Awesome, fantastic, and you're performing at my favorite my homeroom tonight, and it's a bar, and it's the most amazing place I've ever performed stand up in. It's just perfect lighting, perfect sound, perfect staff, perfect comics. I just love them. I love everything about that place. So you have a whiskey warm voice, a martini dry wit, and over reliance in alcohol metaphors. And how
Yeah.
did you discover your voice and stand up in that fashion?
A friend of mine helped me write that. It's so hard to write about yourself with these, and so we had to come up with bios. So we would help each other, kind of writing. So my buddy wrote my bio, I wrote his bio, this kind of thing. And so that was just it. I started. I was older when I got started doing stand up, but I felt like I found my voice fairly quickly. I had been teaching, I think, for about 8 years before I ever got on stage, and so I had a bit of that. Like I knew how to stand up and talk to people. It's definitely a different dynamic. There's a different power structure there. Uh, and most of my first year or two was just all about, it was, fish out of water stuff, being an American living in Poland. And I had taken about, 8 years of my life and condensed it to about an hour and a half on stage in total. And I realized that basically my character on stage is confident but confused. And I figured for as long as I kind of filtered everything through that for a while, that helped me with the joke writing process. So, and since then I've obviously branched out. Can't do that for forever, but that's what helped me get started with the thing.
Indeed. And your style of comedy is an introspection and observation, and you've performed your material all over Europe. And what are some of your favorite cities in Europe that you've performed in?
Well, I love performing in my hometown of Wrocław. I think we have a really good scene there, at least before COVID. And Krakow, also in Poland, is a great place to perform. One of my favorites has really been in a city called Ljubljana in Slovenia. So the capital of Slovenia. They have a great room there. They had a really strong scene, and I performed there 3 or 4 times, and that was great. The same thing in Austria, in Vienna. There's a couple of rooms that I've been that were fantastic. Just good people, good hosts. Other comedians out. And in Croatia, I think it was in Zagreb, I had a really nice time. But yeah, there's some good places to play.
That's pretty awesome. And Europe is a really big continent, so that's awesome. And you've also performed in one city in America. And what was that one city, and what are your favorite memories from that?
Well, it was Daytona Beach. It's right here. So I performed at the Nog 4 years ago. I was home for Christmas and wanted to see if there was just an open mic or something I could do while I was here, because I was going to be home for a couple weeks. And so I'd gotten in touch ended up getting in touch with the Nog. So I did one open mic, and then they invited me back to do a feature set a couple weeks after that. So I've done 2 shows at the Nog before. So of course I made sure to get at least one set up before I left to come visit this time. And it was fun because that was a bar I remember going into when I was a kid, because I grew up in Daytona. I lived here from 9 to 18. And then I went to the University of Tampa for college. And so my folks are still here. So I would obviously, I come home, a couple of times a year. Or sometimes I would, and mainly stay here for the summer. So I remember when that bar was O'Malley's. So that was a place that I went to on my 21st birthday and had to chug a Guinness or something, So it was, but I think it's been the Nog for a million years now. I have no idea when it changed. So I'm kind of dating myself because I hadn't been in a really long time. And so my brother-in-law brought me there, and we had a couple of beers and got to look at the room ahead of time. And it was a fun show. And there was a woman there who seemed it was the open secret that she had murdered her previous 2 boyfriends or something. And then like a week after I performed, a buddy sent me a newspaper article that they had arrested her. And so it's just, you probably know who I'm talking about, but so like, yeah, I got to perform in front of a serial killer, which I think is the most Daytona thing that you could ever do. So,
Absolutely. I remember her quite well. She offered everyone drugs except for me, and I just felt left out. So it's all right. But I'm glad, everything happened the way it did, and that's so awesome. And I didn't know the Nog was known as O'Malley's, and it's such a great history lesson for me with your answers. So.
Yeah, so that was God, 30 years ago or something. So
Wow, indeed. I'm glad it's still holding up. So it's so I love the Nog for sure. And so with this episode, we're raising funds for Faith, and I've been to a couple of their events. And why did you pick Faith to raise funds for with this episode?
so my stepmom is involved with that. So I don't live in America, so I wasn't sure what to choose. And I know this is something that she's very much involved in, and has to do. It's even though it says faith, it's not necessarily a religious organization. I think there are religious people involved with it, but it's all about just trying to do some social justice stuff and trying to do some fair housing. I know is a big part of what they're doing. And since I didn't have anything specific here, I think I would go with, where a family member is actively involved with it.
Absolutely, indeed. And Derek, these are the questions I wanted to ask you. I ask every single comic this whenever I interview them. There's like 600 episodes on the website, on the YouTube too. And what inspired you to perform stand-up comedy?
One more time.
What inspired you to perform stand-up comedy?
Oh, so I did stand up one time when I was in university. So I graduated from the University of Tampa back in 1995, and there was going to be what is it? A talent contest. And so the organization I was a part of, we were trying to think of some ideas, and I decided I wanted to try stand up. I watched a lot of stand up, and I considered myself to be situationally funny, but I didn't really know how to write a joke at this point. And so I wanted to push myself with that. I figured it was my last chance. It was my senior year of college. And another guy in my organization wanted to sing. And so they took a vote, and I won. So I found out later that half the people were hoping that I would win, and half the people were hoping that I would bomb, and then I would just shut up, and I kind of disappointed everybody by just doing okay. I did a good enough job, but I didn't win. But it was a very exciting experience, and it was just, I was nervous. As soon as they said I could do it, my stomach tied into a knot, and every day that knot grew a little tighter. And then I went and I performed, and I felt I did fairly well. And then, all the adrenaline dumped into my stomach, and I felt like I had a hot stone for about 2 hours. And then I just never did it again, because I was getting ready to graduate. And even though I think there was a comedy club basically across the street from where I was living, but all the jokes I had written were specifically for people who went to my university. Like, if you didn't go to that school, you would have no idea what I was talking about. And so part of me thought I should write something. I should see what I could do. And then I just didn't, and that always kind of haunted me. And I thought, what if I would have tried? What if I just would have tried? This is mid 90s. So there was kind of a bust at that point. And if I could have got maybe involved in that, and maybe I could have gone somewhere with it. So I was promised myself, if I ever had the opportunity to do stand-up, I would do it. And then the universe called my bluff. So like I said, after being in Poland for 8 years, there was another American that had moved to more or less the same city. And he was a performer. He did, he did mime. He did a couple other things. And he wanted to try his hand at stand-up. And there's really not a history of stand-up in Poland. They're more cabaret kind of stuff, like vaudeville, let's say. So we were kind of a niche of a niche. It's this, we're doing a art form they don't really get in a language they don't speak natively. But so he decided he was going to do this. And the friend that actually convinced me to move to Poland had met up with him. And the first thing, they just wanted me to host the first show. So my buddy Chris was going to open the show, and Jim was going to headline it. And they just needed me to host. And I'm like, all right, I teach English. I stand up and talk to people every day. This will be pretty easy. So I wrote like 2 jokes, and then I was just prepared to kind of get people on and off stage. And of course, it's not easy. It's super, super hard. And I have almost zero memory of that first time on stage. And so then it was decided that I was going to open the next show. So basically, I hosted a show. I did one open mic, and then I did a 20-minute opening set all within 2 months, because that's just how we could do it there, because there was nobody really involved. We sort of built it from the ground up. So there was a comedy troupe in Warsaw that had been kicking around for maybe a year before we started, if that. We helped start the Krakow scene a little bit later, a couple years into it. So it was just, there was no rules, and I wrote that first, 20-minute set, and it took me a while to figure out certain things on stage. But yeah, it was just, and I didn't know if I was going to do it for a month. I didn't know if I was going to do it for a year, whatever. And 9 years later, I'm still out there doing it. So it's it's a thrill, it's a rush, and it's a challenge. Even now, even after I don't teach anymore, but I taught for 11 years and still getting on stage after 9 years, and it's you're learning something every single time, or you should be. So I still get a little nervous before I go on stage, and I figure if you're not nervous, you don't care. And if you don't care, you shouldn't be there. So, it's not quite as bad as that first year. I was just mid panic all the time. I was just sweating every single day because I knew at some point I was going to be back on that stage. And I'm not that bad anymore. But now, just like the day of the show, right before the show, I get the butterflies. I really think that's because I care.
Indeed, most definitely, and it's a love-hate relationship for sure for stand-up,
Yeah.
like most everything else. And what was it feeling like when you first performed stand-up?
So the first time doing it in Poland, like I said, that let's say not including the host thing. So the first time I went up and did the open mic, there weren't many people willing to do it. So instead of only having the 5 minutes, the host gave us a couple extra minutes to go. And so I was trying some of the stuff I was going to eventually do, obviously, for my opening set. And so I think I ended up doing 7 or 9 minutes. And it's hard for me to watch that now because I'm just shouting the whole time because of the adrenaline, but it's just amazing because I remember, sitting in the bar and I'm getting more and more nervous. And when Jim called my name to go up there to perform, my vision went gray. It was just like, and I got up and it's like, I either need to start talking or I'm going to physically die. And I just launched into it. And I learned a lot of things from that first time, what kind of works on stage, what doesn't work on stage, and which is obviously an ongoing process. But that it was like, I was a little too specific about certain things and finding out what works for me on stage, what an audience would expect from somebody like me. And, but yeah, it felt great. I got back, and then I kept writing and got back up and kept doing it. So it's been a lot of fun.
Indeed, and it's always my fellow comic friends are always telling me trim the fat and add this tag and whatever. And so,
Yeah.
indeed, I hear you on that one. And we spoke of records earlier because you have a podcast about records. And what are your favorite comedy specials and comedy record albums?
Oh, wow. It's been a long time since I've listened to a comedy album. I haven't really kept up with that much. So I remember, of course, you have your George Carlin stuff and your Richard Pryor stuff that I remember listening to as a kid. I can't think of anything specific. And I watched just a ton of stand-up comedy in the late 80s and early 90s because that's when, every cable station had a show. There was Caroline's Comedy Hour, Evening at the Improv, MTV's Half Hour Comedy Hour, or whatever they called it. So I saw a ton of stuff of people doing their 7 minutes and caught a couple of live things when I was in college. I remember seeing, Carrot Top had come to our university and performed, and another guy whose name just escaped me. But as far as like the album, I remember having Andrew Dice Clay's record, and I remember having Sam Kinnison's record when I was in high school. And since then, I've seen some great specials, and one that I watched fairly recently that I really liked was the most recent one from Anthony Jeselnik, and where he's all about one-liners, but he finished that show with like a 20-minute set about bringing a friend of his to get an abortion. And so while he still has his one-liners in there, that was the first time he did anything close to storytelling that I can remember having seen. And I don't do one-liners. They're so hard. And you have to write so many of them. And so the fact that he does that while being just the meanest person ever, as in that persona, I don't believe he's that way in real life, but it's amazing to me. And just the craft that goes into it. It's like, Stephen Wright with a mean streak. And so I really enjoyed that. And the most recent from Jim Jeffries, an Australian comedian who I think lives in the UK. And those are the two that I remember watching recently and really, really enjoying.
Indeed. Topical humor is my Achilles heel, so I feel your pain when it comes to your one-liners and stuff. And Derrek, if you can go on tour with any comedian locally and internationally known, which comedians would you like to go on tour with?
I would like to go on tour with Jeselnik because it's so different from what I do, and I would really like to see what his process is, and just to see what it would be like to tour with somebody like that, because it would be a very different sensibility, and I think that would be, for me, a lot of fun. Maybe not so much for Anthony, but I would enjoy it.
Indeed. And what are your favorite sitcom sketch shows and comedy films?
Oh, wow. My favorite sitcom is probably Community. I really enjoyed that when it was first out, and then I had some unexpected back surgery last summer and ended up rewatching the first 3 or 4 seasons of Community, and most of that really still held up for me. So that one I find to be very funny. Um, I can't think of any. I don't. I watch TV very sporadically. Again, living in Poland, it's not always not everything is available, or I don't always have the opportunity to catch all that stuff. So I remember really enjoying the first couple of seasons of Modern Family. But I think that's one of those shows that was a victim of its own success. I don't think they kept reaching for a while. So I watched a couple of seasons of that, and I thought it was pretty funny. But I can't think of much. I don't watch a lot in the way of sitcoms, though. I don't know if it would be considered a sitcom, but I watched Hacks with Gene Smart, and I can't remember the other actress's name. But obviously, there's the stand-up comedy hook to it, and so I just plowed through that. But that's maybe an HBO Max show, something. I don't remember, but I enjoyed that quite a bit.
Awesome. And sketch shows?
Sketch shows, of course. I mean, I'm of the age that I got that third wave of Saturday Night Live. So I remember watching that like in '85. There was that one season where it was like with Robert Downey Jr. and I think only like Dennis Miller and one other comedian ended up sticking around past that one season. But I loved Kids in the Hall. So Kids in the Hall was the one that I remember in high school watching with a friend of mine, and we really enjoyed that. I love their sensibility, and that's still super funny. Every once in a while, I'll just kind of go down the YouTube rabbit hole with those guys, and it still makes me laugh. And Key and Peele, I think those guys are just geniuses. So, and that's one that I've pretty much exclusively watched through just through YouTube, because that was all done while I was already over there. So that'll be one where I'll see something, it'll come up on, like recommendations, and then I'll end up spending 3 hours just watching different clips from those guys. So, I'd say those two.
Indeed. And comedy films?
What do I like it? First one, Super Troopers. I don't know if you remember that one. That one is that was the first comedy I remember watching that it was funnier the second time, which that never happens. But yeah, so that and Shaun of the Dead I really like, and probably my all-time favorite movie is Better Off Dead with John Cusack. It was like one of his first roles, and it's just absurd and very, very funny. That's a movie I've seen 100 times, and I was able to find Polish subtitles so my wife could watch it with me. And it was very weird because it's very much an '80s teen comedy, from whatever it was, '82, '83, something like that. So but still has the power to make me laugh. So that's probably my all-time favorite.
Indeed. And you mentioned John Cusack, and I just saw his movie Cell with Samuel L. Jackson that was based off a Stephen King novel. It's free on YouTube, so it's a pretty interesting movie. So highly recommend it.
I'll check that one out. Yeah.
Indeed. And so if you can get roasted by 5 comedians past and present, which comedians would you like to get roasted by?
I definitely have to have Bob Ross on there because he is the roast master general. So it'd be nice to have him doing his thing. I would like Sam Kinison was someone I'd loved as a kid, and same thing with Bill Hicks. So those two I think were it'd be an honor to be pilloried by them. And we'll go with Jeselnik because I've already brought him up once, and then maybe Amy Schumer. I always feel like she's got some good stuff there. I go back and forth on her as a comedian, but I think as a roaster, she was always pretty good.
Awesome. And we have some viewers in the audience, so if you'd like to jump in the comments and interact with us, you're more than welcome to, but be nice to us. And where do you see your comedy journey in the next 5 years, Derrek?
I'm hoping it gets back on. Obviously we all had to take this year and a half break basically. And I didn't do a whole lot of writing during that time because I wasn't doing a whole lot of anything. So that was tough, and it kind of just knocked the sales out of me for a bit. But I think we're all getting back there. And I don't have any like specific thing. And like I said, I'm working in Poland, so it's a niche of a niche. Though I would love to find a way to make this a little bit more, something a little more profitable is what I would like to see in the next 5 years. So, even if it's just some kind of working on some kind of Polish TV show or something. I don't know. But in the meantime, it's like I just get such a thrill out of doing it that even if I didn't make any money, I would still probably, show up for the open mics and stuff. So
Indeed. You answered my next question, which is which other forms of comedy would you like to enter off into, like improv, sketch, comedy, writing, acting, directing? TV work. So yeah,
Yeah, I would love
so
to. I would love to do some TV work because improv is not my thing. Like I get why people enjoy it, but to quote Dave Foley from Kids in the Hall, I think all improv could use a good rewrite.
absolutely. And what is your favorite joke a comic has written?
Oh God, so that would have to be like a year-long project. I don't know. I have no idea. That's way too hard. So, but it would probably end up being something that George Carlin wrote because he's the goat. So finding something from there, I don't know. Couldn't even
Indeed.
begin to tell you.
And what experience would you like your audience to take with them after a set is over?
I'm hoping that they can understand. I'm used to dealing with Polish audiences, and so having to deal with that sensibility, and I obviously preparing for the show tonight, I had to make sure there's not too, not it can't be anything that has to do with the Polish language. It can't be anything to do with the Polish culture for the most part. And I'm hoping people will still get a little bit of the immigrant experience from an American, so you can see some of that. Yeah.
Awesome. Which reminds me, tonight's show is at the Trinidad Irish Pub, formerly known as O'Malley's, at 10 p.m. Be there by 10. Show starts around 10:30, 10:45. Depends on how many people show up and all that good stuff. And also, this is stand-up speakeasy, Derek. And to be invited to the club, you got to know someone. And so, with that being said, Derek, which comics in Poland or that that you'd like to see on the future episodes of the stand-up speakeasy?
I would love to see Jim Williams, famous Jim Williams. He's the one that got things started in Wrocław. He's getting ready to move to Brno in the Czech Republic, but he's a pro and somebody good to talk to. Or my buddy Christian A. Dumais, who also does some stand up here in Wrocław with me and a few others. So one of those two guys I think should definitely be on the show.
Absolutely. I'll reach out to them and I'll make sure I'll do my very best to get them on the show because I love branching out to international territory now with comics and it's fantastic that I got to interview you and thank you so much for your time. Is there any final words you'd like to give out to the audience at home?
No, I hope to see you at the show tonight. So I'll be going on first as they do it at the Nog. So I should be on hopefully about 10:30. I know there's an open mic afterwards, and I'm planning on sticking around for that just to see some of the local comedians. So come on out, and if you insist on buying me a beer, I will drink it.
Awesome, fantastic. I'll be there DJing, taking photos as usual, and closing out the mic. So we'll see however long that lasts. I usually go on at midnight for some reason, but it's a whole lot of fun. I love watching stand up and absorbing it all because being the student of the game. So Derek, thank you so much for being my guest today. And everyone follow Derek on Facebook, Instagram, donate to his PayPal, follow him on Twitter, visit his website, check out his podcast, and donate to Faith. And we'll see you on the next episode of the Stand Up Speakeasy. And be well and take care of each other.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.